Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Warren Buffett has officially called the top, selling billions in stocks. We have a new civilization that was found in Mexico, and we also have record highs for gold. Let's go ahead and get started. Bunch of economic information to get to as well. Sorry, I didn't upload the last few weeks. I had a couple of technical issues with the camera, but now we're back. U.S. economy officially has grown 2.8% in quarter three at an annualized rate. It is positive, but it's actually slowing down compared to the previous quarters that we've had as well. One of the things that we should consider as well when we actually look at the economic data is the fact that the reason why the economy is growing is really because of the federal government investing so much money. And if you guys, don't know, there's, I think, 270 something agencies, 290 something federal agencies. Elon Musk shared this, where there's basically been 2 agencies created every year since the beginning of the American Republic. So I thought that was super interesting because there's a lot, why do we need so many agencies for? For example, I think Elon Musk got rid of 90% of the workers at Twitter. X works just fine. Javier Milei in Argentina got rid of, I think it was, something like 70 or 80% of all the ministries that were there as well to be able to get the finances back in control. And in the United States, we're running in that situation where we're about to hit $36 trillion in debt, and we have nothing to show for it, except the wars that should have never happened. On Thursday, the stock market had a huge dip. There was $953 billion wiped out from the stock market. It did recover on Friday for most of it. Dow and NASDAQ were positive for the week. S&P 500, let me go ahead and repeat that. The 3 stock markets were actually down for the week. I had a different number written here. And Buffett officially called the top. He dumped 100 million Apple shares, which is representative of 25% of his stake. He sold $34.6 billion in shares. And now he has almost a record $250 billion in cash. And one of the things I always tell you is pay attention to what they do. Don't pay attention to what they say, right? Remember Bank of America? Warren Buffett was letting go of that stock in record amounts as well. For other reasons, obviously, he knows that they have a really bad balance sheet, but I think his selling is indicative of what he sees coming at some point, I would say, in the second half of this year. We're already in the second half, but you know what I mean. By the end of the year, maybe the first quarter of next year. It even depends also what happens to the presidential election, which is on Tuesday. But when the most prolific investor of our time, who basically almost always calls it right, decides to sell this amount of stock, which is almost unprecedented, I think this is a real signal of what's coming. So prepare yourself for educational purposes only. Conspiracy theory news, New York City. Where's my button? They just fixed it. New York City is on a water drought watch. The mayor of New York City, I believe it's Eric Adams, went on a video to talk about how you may want to start conserving water because it hasn't rained as much. So we'll see what happens with that. There was also some pretty devastating floods in Valencia, Spain. I don't know if you guys remember, I believe it was the 3rd week of December 2020. I did a video letting you guys know. I always tell you guys at the end of the video, right? The preppers were right. You guys can see the escalation of these natural disasters. Economic problems, social problems, all this stuff is going to continue to get worse, in my opinion, especially the natural disasters. The EU Commission, check this out. The EU Commission is calling citizens to stock up on supplies in most bloc countries, as he stated, and I quote, not in a position to ensure the survival of their citizens for at least 3 days. So I'll run some other things at you. Remember, I believe it was about 4 months ago, they gave the congressmen in the United States the satellite phones in case of an emergency. So this just, I've been trading for so long that I can kind of see the dots, I can connect the patterns on the dots. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or right after the presidential election, but something is going to happen and it's going to get bad. Because otherwise there wouldn't be government officials even in Europe calling for people to stock up on stuff for 3 days. Like if a government official says it, right? It's like, I'm not the crazy one anymore. Now a government official is saying it. Prepare yourself. Overseas market news. The European markets are mostly lower. Latin America was mixed. The Bovespa in Brazil, which is the biggest market in all of Latin America, went down by just over 1%. Africa and the Middle East was mostly mixed, with Nigeria going most negative of all, over 2% negative. And in the far, far east, Asia and Australia, mostly lower also. Philippines was the biggest loser there at 2.53%. Bitcoin and other news, Coinbase is down over 15%. They had their worst day in over 2 years after their Q3 earnings miss. The revenue came in at just under expectations. And Bitcoin, even though it flung around quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken, it got over 71,000, went up by 3.71% this week to $69,457. Commodity and energy, crude prices slid in the biggest one-day decline since 2022. This is on the news that Israel directly struck Iran. Now they're expecting a hit from them back, mainly from the proxies that they have in Iraq. So Israel attacked Iran. Iran is going to, I'm checking the sound here, make sure I just hit that cable. Israel hit Iran directly. Iran now is going to strike them back, maybe before the election, but they didn't hit any crude, nuclear, or civilian infrastructure. So they just kind of like, just like, let's pay them back, but not really hit them hard. Crude oil prices rose slightly on Friday after it was actually seen that maybe this isn't going to be escalation for World War III. Crude went down by over 3% to $69.49. The international crude, which is called Brent, went down by over 4% to $73.10. Gold down 0.44% to $2,736.50. It hit another all-time high this week, just under 2,775. And silver was the big loser. It went down almost 4% to 32.52. And while silver hasn't hit a record high yet, it's well on the way, and it's hit a multi-decade high as well. You guys have been following me for a while. You know how I love my silver. Financial and banking news. The yen, which is the currency from Japan, weakened to a fresh 3-month low against the U.S. dollar on the elections in Japan. Weakest level since July 31st. Might be a good time to go to Japan. Germany's October inflation surged to 2.4% in October, much higher than what the central bank in the European Union wants, which is 2%. They narrowly avoided a technical recession in the third quarter as well. And a new Argentina tax amnesty program. Milei, the new libertarian president there, wanted to bring in more dollars that people had in their homes or even foreign money that they had overseas. And so they were able to raise $18 billion from their residents, signifying that a lot of people have confidence in what Milei is doing. I mentioned, I believe it was in the beginning of the video, how he slashed the amount of, Department of, all this stuff like Environment of Equality, Department of, all this nonsense that we don't really need. Not saying we don't need equality, but you know what I mean. And he's reduced the load, the budget load, the let's call it the corruption in Argentina by quite a bit, because he reduced the size of government. But they still have triple-digit inflation. So imagine you have, 10% inflation a month, where you go and buy a chicken. I don't know what chicken costs in the U.S. anymore, but let's say it's $10. But then next month it's $11, and then next month is $12. It's bad. Economic news: China's industrial profits in September fell by 27% year over year. Steepest plunge since the start of the pandemic. Remember, China is the second largest economy in the world. In addition to that, they produce everything in the world practically. So if their industries aren't doing well, that means that the economy isn't doing well. Eurozone, the economy expanded by 0.4%, avoiding a technical recession. As I mentioned to you guys just a moment ago, Germany and France, two of the largest economy in Europe, in the Eurozone, I should say, because the UK is not in the Eurozone anymore, outperformed. And U.S. job openings fell to their lowest level in 3.5 years in September, pointing to easing labor market conditions, which is not bueno at all. The job openings fell to the lowest level since January of 2021, and the U.S. added just 17,000 jobs just before the election. And the jobs created so far last month were 120,000, which were the lowest in the last 4 years. In political news, Uruguay is going to the election poll for president and Congress, country of 3.4 million people. Great country. Kind of a some parts are nice. Corporate news, Ford fell 8.44% after they reported that they're going to make the lower side of their guidance, which is $10 billion. JetBlue Airways also isn't doing well. They went down 17% after they missed their earnings and also said that they expected a dip in revenue for the rest of the year. Chipotle, one of the best inventions in the United States, they went down almost 8% on the news that they didn't hit their numbers either for quarter three. But Amazon, the huge conglomerate, surged almost 6.19% as they beat analyst expectations. Technology, Ukraine has reported that they're using domestically made AI-augmented system drones to attack Russia. They have a lot of defenses now where human pilots have problems flying jets, so now they're using, this is the future of warfare, looks like AI, Terminator. I guess there's a reason why they made that movie, right? And in international events, as I mentioned to you guys about Valencia, they had a year's worth of rain in 8 hours. Rivers, fell out of its banks. There was 3 meters of water, or about 10 feet of water, taking horses and cars and all kinds of things. It's a really horrible situation. And an interesting fact, scientists in Colombia have uncovered a wealth of new animal and plant species since the peace deal with the FARC, the revolutionary forces, in 2016. They found 3 times the amount of new plant species, in addition to quite a bit of new animal species as well. And researchers also recently uncovered a secret Mayan city in Mexico in the Campeche region. I believe it's around the Yucatan. Over 65,000 structures. They use LiDAR. If you don't know what LiDAR is, basically it's they take drones or helicopters and they beam a radar that allows them to create 3D images of what's under the vegetation in the trees. They found over 6,500 structures, 21 square miles. I believe in kilometers or something like 14 square kilometers, something like that, 15. Stone pyramids, houses, other infrastructures as well, has been concealed for over 3,000 years. Another thing that you guys didn't know, there was a high rise that they were putting up in Miami. And so they had to go so deep for the foundations, they actually found artifacts that dated back before the civilizations supposedly that we came from in the Middle East. Graham Hancock has a new series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. Highly recommended. He talks about the Americas and how maybe there were people here much earlier than we think. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.